The problem here is not that the Iraqi government doesn't have troops and firepower. The Iraqi government has, between security forces and army, something in the range of 650,000 soldiers or people under arms. It has a defense budget around 17 billion. It is trying to defend itself against a few thousand lightly armed insurgents. The problem is that the insurgents have the sympathy of the public in these areas, in these Sunni areas. We've seen this movie before, Jake. This was what happened in 2007, 2008. And with 140,000 troops, General Petraeus still said the only solution was political. You had to reach out to the Sunnis, to the tribes. You had to divide the Sunnis so that they stopped supporting, groups like Al-Qaeda. That's the same solution here. And if Prime Minister Maliki isn't willing to do it, sending in a few hundred more American advisors or a few thousand more American troops is certainly not going to solve the problem.
Welcome to yet another Middle Eastern free-for-all. Saudi Arabia has decided the time is right to get their military involved with the Iraq crisis. Somalia doesn't want to be left out. And you better believe Israel is watching everything with an eye toward what it means to their security in the not-too-distant future. Welcome to MidPoint. From the Washington Times, foreign policy and security analyst Fred Gedrich joins us today on the show. Fred, thanks so much for being here.
Delighted to be with you.
Fred, there was a couple of interesting things we just heard in that soundbite that I wanted to get your take on right away. Noting the sympathy of the public, is that something that perhaps we are underestimating in Iraq when it comes down to ISIS and their movement towards Baghdad? Is that, quite frankly, there is a public sympathy for this group and a hatred of the government that is there right now, that simply no matter what we try to do, no matter how we handle it, no matter what we think we can do, it simply is not going to change?
Well, sectarian factions, the Kurd, Sunnis, and Shiites. The Shiites are the most populous group of the three, and they happen to control the government. So when you say the people are on the side of the insurgents, I would say that's true with regard to the Sunni population, which consists of Saddam Hussein's former Ba'athist people, as well as the Al-Qaeda core from not only Iraq and those fighting in Syria, but neighboring countries and North African countries. They flocked into Syria to fight the Assad regime and then spilled over in the border in Iraq and took 1/3 of the country in a short span of time. Really something that should concern the Obama administration and the free world, for that matter.
You mentioned the Saddam Hussein core. Is it possible? Of course it's possible, but did we as America, did everybody overlook and perhaps underestimate that years later, after Saddam Hussein was dead, that you would still have that political faction that he was involved in that would still be powerful, or at least still trying to gain power? It seems as if indeed we underestimated this.
We did underestimate it, but I don't think they're the predominant force on the Sunni side. I think the jihadists are. Al-Baghdadi, who is determined to form a caliph, and he's in the army of 10,000 jihadists, and they ruthless, backgarden, and it looks like the Shiite government of Iraq is no match for them, and that's a big concern. The only group that seems to be able to hold off the Sunni jihadis are the Kurds, the Peshmerga.
It doesn't make a difference how many times we look at the numbers, and we're going to show our audience some numbers here right now about the approval or disapproval rating of the way Barack Obama is handling the situation in Iraq. 37% of the people approve, 55% of the people who were polled disapprove. This is a Quinnipiac University poll. And as we look at these numbers here and the way that the president is handling the situation in Iraq, I go back to what was also said in that soundbite, where it talks to reaching out to the tribes, which indeed is something that the Obama administration and others have pushed forward for many years. Reach out to the tribes, bring them in. Fred, from your opinion, looking at foreign policy as you do, is it simply just, can we put this away and put this discussion to bed forever, that there is simply no way to reach out to these tribes at any instance and get them all together and sit down at the same time to come to some sort of conclusion?
Well, the Shia and Sunnis have been fighting with each other for centuries. We're not going to, in the short run, ever solve that problem. I think what worked for Petraeus during the surge is money going in the hands of tribal leaders from the Sunni section of the country, and that seemed to help in defeating the Al-Qaeda element in Iraq. But when President Obama decided to remove all U.S. troops and made a statement when he did it that we're leaving behind a sovereign, stable, and self-reliant Iraq, that was anything but sovereign, cannot protect its borders or control one-third of the country. It's certainly not stable with all the bombing and fighting going on, and it's not self-reliant. It's counting on the Russians, the Iranians, and begging for the U.S. to come in and help against the Sunnis. The last thing we want to do is be on the side of the Iranians fighting against the Sunni jihadists. We're in a real pickle because we removed American troops. The question is whether or not the Obama administration is up to resolving this problem and protecting American interests in the heart of the Arab world. And I don't think they're not. They are, based on the decisions they made over the past few years.
Fred, I only have about 30, 40 seconds left. What do we take from the fact that we now know that the United States has disclosed that they have about 120 troops working in Somalia right now, and apparently it has been there for some time. Certainly it is all part of what's going on. What are we to take from those troops being there?
In Somalia?
Yes.
Somalia, we also sent them in Nigeria to try to help find the girls that were kidnapped a few months ago by Boko Haram, another Al-Qaeda offshoot. In fact, they're considered the Nigerian Taliban. We also have them in other countries. But if you look across the African landscape, that is the last place we will get involved in land warfare or any type of warfare. It's very complicated. I wrote several items on Libya, Mali, Nigeria, and general Arab world, and published by the Washington Times for your listeners to refer to. But it's a real mess. The whole world's exploding before us, and we have a president who doesn't seem to be up to the task of at least coming.
There you go. The last place we want to get involved. That is certainly a good way to put it. Fred, we're all out of time, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll do it again. Fred Gedrich from the Washington Times, and we'll be back right here on MidPoint, where we question everything.
Pat Boone here with a word.